Darien Voss groaned as his eyes flickered open. His head throbbed, and the sharp scent of burning metal filled his lungs. The dim red emergency lights of his cockpit flickered weakly, casting eerie shadows across the shattered controls. His ship had crashed. He unbuckled himself from the seat and tried to stand, but a jolt of pain shot through his leg. Gritting his teeth, he reached down. Only a deep bruise. He had survived worse. Taking a deep breath, he pushed open the hatch. Outside, the sky was a deep violet, streaked with twin suns hanging low on the horizon. The air was thick, warm, and heavy with the scent of alien flora. Towering trees with dark, silver leaves loomed in the distance, but what caught his attention was something far more pressing. He wasn't alone. A group of figures stood in a wide circle around his wrecked ship. Their armor gleamed under the sunlight. Tall, elegant, and battle-worn. Each carried a weapon, but none raised them. They simply watched him, their glowing amber eyes filled with something between curiosity and caution. Then one of them stepped forward. She was taller than the others, her dark violet hair flowing behind her like a silken river. A crown of sharp golden metal adorned her head, and her presence alone demanded attention. This was no ordinary warrior. This was their leader. Darien exhaled slowly. He had read about them before, the Valkyrie, a race of proud and powerful warriors. But what was their queen doing here? She studied him, her expression unreadable. Then, in a voice smooth yet commanding, she spoke. So the rumors were true. Darien frowned. Rumors? What were they talking about? Another warrior, a broad-shouldered male with silver scars marking his cheek, took a step forward. You are human. His voice was deep, filled with restrained tension. Darien tilted his head. Last time I checked. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some exchanged wary glances, others clenched their weapons tighter. They fear me, Darien realized. Why? The queen narrowed her golden eyes. You are the legend. Darien raised an eyebrow. He was just a pilot. Nothing more, nothing less. Yet these people spoke of him as if he were something greater, something dangerous. Legend, he echoed, crossing his arms. I think you've got the wrong guy. The queen's lips curled slightly, not in amusement, but in deep thought. You crashed on our world, human. That is no accident. Darien sighed. He was in no position to argue, not while surrounded by armed warriors. He needed information, and a way out. Before he could speak, the silver-scarred warrior gestured to the others. In a swift motion, two Valkyries stepped forward, gripping Darien's arms. He didn't resist, but his muscles tensed instinctively. Come with us, the queen ordered. Darien had no choice. As they led him away from the wreckage, he cast one last glance at his broken ship. Whatever had just begun, he knew one thing for sure. This was no ordinary rescue. This was destiny. Darien Voss walked in silence, flanked by two Valkyrie warriors. Their hands gripped his arms tightly, though he wasn't struggling. He had no reason to. At least, not yet. The Valkyrie city rose before him like something out of an ancient legend. Massive towers of dark stone and shimmering gold stretched high into the violet sky. Fiery banners snapped in the wind, displaying the crest of their empire, a fierce winged beast with piercing eyes. The streets were lined with Valkyrie citizens, their glowing amber eyes locked onto him with awe, fear, and curiosity. They think I'm dangerous. Darien wasn't sure why, but he could feel it in the way they whispered to one another, the way they stepped back as he passed. He wasn't just some lost traveler to them. He was something else, something greater. At the front of the procession, Queen Seraphis, Velkera, walked with graceful authority. Her violet hair flowed down her back, her golden crown catching the light of the twin suns. Though she had spoken little since his capture, her eyes had never left him, as if studying his every movement. After a long walk, they arrived at a colossal structure, the Hall of Judgment. The heavy doors opened with a deep groan, revealing an enormous chamber lined with towering stone pillars. At the far end, an ancient warrior, General Kalroth, stood beside an obsidian throne. His armor was darker than the others, his expression unreadable. Seraphis took her place on the throne, her gaze sharp. "Human," she said, her voice carrying through the chamber. "Do you know why you are feared on this world?" Darian crossed his arms, tilting his head. "I'm starting to get the idea." A few Valkyrie warriors bristled at his tone, but Seraphis remained unmoved. "Long ago, our ancestors spoke of a prophecy," she continued. "A human would arrive in our darkest hour, either as our salvation or our destruction." Darian raised an eyebrow. "That's a bit dramatic, don't you think?" Kalroth stepped forward, his deep voice like distant thunder. "Is it?" He gestured to Darian's hands. "Your kind are said to be cunning beyond measure, to fight with strategies no warrior can predict, to turn the tide of battle with nothing but willpower. Is that not true?" Darian shrugged. "I don't know about prophecy, but humans do whatever it takes to survive. If that makes us dangerous, then yeah, I guess we are." Murmurs echoed through the hall. Some Valkyrie nodded grimly, while others exchanged nervous glances. Seraphis leaned forward. "Then prove it." Darian frowned. "Prove what?" "The arena of trials," she said. "If you are to remain in our city, you must face one of our strongest warriors in battle. If you survive, you may earn our trust. If you fall—" She didn't finish the sentence, but the meaning was clear. Darian exhaled slowly. He had no armor, no weapons, just his wits and his instincts. Great, just another day in the life of Darian Voss. He looked at Seraphis, then at the hardened warriors around him. Running wasn't an option. Negotiation wouldn't work. So, he smirked. "All right, Your Highness," he said. "Let's see what your strongest warriors got." Seraphis gave a slight nod, impressed by his lack of fear. Kalroth stepped forward, his golden eyes burning like fire. "Then it is decided. The human fights at sundown." Darian clenched his fists as the warriors led him away. He had faced death before, but something told him this fight would be different. This time, the entire Valkyrie Empire would be watching. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the grand arena. Thousands of Valkyrie had gathered, their golden eyes glowing in the dim light. The air was filled with excitement, tension, and something else, expectation. Darian Voss stood in the center of the arena, rolling his shoulders. The ground beneath him was smooth stone, cracked and worn from countless battles. He had no armor, no weapon, nothing but his own skill and instincts. Above him, on a raised platform, Queen Seraphis Velkera watched with her usual calm expression. Beside her, General Kalroth stood like a statue, his arms crossed. A loud horn sounded, and the crowd roared. Darian turned as a massive gate on the opposite side of the arena rumbled open. Heavy footsteps echoed through the space as his opponent emerged. A towering Valkyrie warrior stepped forward. His armor was black and silver, his shoulders broad as a mountain. His face was scared, his amber eyes filled with cold determination. He carried a massive curved blade that gleamed under the fading sunlight. Kalroth's voice rang out. "Champion Korvek, you face the human. Show no mercy." Korvek slammed his blade into the ground, causing a sharp metallic clang. "I do not intend to." His voice was deep, filled with confidence. Darian exhaled. "All right, Voss. Time to survive." The horn sounded again. The fight had begun. Korvek moved fast, faster than Darian expected for someone so massive. The blade came down in a blur of silver. Darian barely dodged, rolling to the side as the weapon struck the stone, sending sparks flying. No time to think. Move. Darian lunged forward, aiming a punch at the warrior's ribs. It was like hitting solid rock. Korvek barely reacted before swinging the blade again. Darian ducked, feeling the wind rush over his head. The crowd roared, but Darian wasn't listening. He had seen warriors like this before, powerful, disciplined, but predictable. Korvac relied on strength, on ending fights quickly. Darien, however, fought differently. As Korvac swung again, Darien twisted, avoiding the blade by inches. He moved in close, grabbing the warrior's wrist and twisting hard. Korvac grunted, his grip loosening for a split second. It was all Darien needed. He struck, an elbow to the ribs, a knee to the side. Quick, precise. Korvac staggered back, surprised. The crowd murmured. The human had landed a hit. Seraphis leaned forward slightly. Kelleroth narrowed his eyes. Korvac growled, gripping his blade tighter. His stance changed. He was taking Darien seriously now. That's not good. The next attack came even faster. Darien dodged left, but Korvac anticipated it, slamming his shoulder into him. Pain exploded in Darien's ribs as he was thrown back. He hit the ground hard, rolling to absorb the impact. He coughed, struggling to breathe. Korvac approached. "You fight well," he admitted, "but you are still only human." Darien wiped blood from his lip, grinning despite himself. "Yeah?" He forced himself to stand. "Then why are you out of breath?" Korvac hesitated. He was breathing harder now. He was stronger, but Darien had made him work for every attack. Darien exhaled, forcing his body to stay steady. He wasn't done yet. The fight wasn't over. And he would prove, once and for all, why humans were legends. The arena was alive with energy. Thousands of Valkyrie warriors shouted, their voices echoing across the stone walls. Some cheered for Korvac, their champion. Others, though fewer in number, whispered among themselves about the human who still stood, bruised, bleeding, but unbroken. Darien wiped the sweat from his forehead, breathing hard. His ribs ached from Korvac's last hit, but he forced himself to stand tall. Pain didn't matter. Not now. Across from him, Korvac steadied his massive curved blade. His amber eyes locked onto Darien with renewed focus. He had underestimated the human at first. Now he wouldn't make that mistake again. Good. Bring it. Korvac charged. His movements were faster than before, more precise. He swung his blade in a downward arc, aiming to end the fight in one brutal strike. Darien didn't step back. He stepped forward. The sudden move surprised Korvac. Darien ducked under the blade, closing the distance in an instant. 1 second. That was all he needed. He drove his fist into Korvac's side. Not a wild punch, but a precise strike to a pressure point. The Valkyrie warrior grunted, his balance shifting. Darien grabbed his wrist, twisting with all his strength. Korvac lost his grip. The massive curved blade slipped from his fingers, spinning through the air before landing in the dust. The crowd gasped. Darien didn't stop. He struck again, a sharp kick to the knee, forcing Korvac down. The massive warrior fell to one knee, panting. Silence spread through the arena. The invincible champion of the Valkyrie was kneeling, unarmed. From the royal platform, Queen Seraphis Velkara watched with a sharp gaze. She leaned forward slightly, her expression unreadable. Had she expected this? Darien could barely stand. His entire body screamed with exhaustion. But he had done it. He had won. He exhaled and looked at Korvac, who remained still. His golden eyes met Darien's, no longer filled with arrogance, but something else. Respect. After a long pause, Korvac lowered his head. "The fight is over," he said, his deep voice carrying through the arena. "The human has won." The arena erupted. Some roared in disbelief. Others cheered, because whether they liked it or not, they had just witnessed something legendary. Darien turned toward the royal platform. "So," he called out, his voice hoarse, "does this mean I get to stay?" Seraphis studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she smiled. "You are not what I expected, human," she said. "But I see now. The rumors were true." She stood, her royal cloak flowing behind her. Darien Voss, from this day forward, you are no longer a prisoner. Her golden eyes gleamed. You are a warrior of the Valkyrie. The crowd exploded with noise. Some protested. Others clapped their fists to their chests, a sign of deep respect. Darien let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He had survived. He had won. And now he was more than just an outsider. He had just become part of something greater. The celebration had lasted for hours. The Valkyrie were a warrior race, and they respected strength. Though many still whispered about the humans' victory, none could deny that Darien Voss had earned his place among them. Now, as the twin moons rose over the capital city of Veltherim, Darien stood at the entrance of the great hall. His body still ached from the battle, but the sting of his wounds was nothing compared to the weight of what had just happened. He was no longer a prisoner. He had been given a place among the Valkyrie. Darien turned his gaze upward. The great hall was massive, built from dark stone, and covered in glowing golden symbols that pulsed like veins of living energy. Inside, warriors feasted, drinking from large metal cups, their voices loud with battle songs and stories. At the center of it all, Queen Seraphis, Velkera, sat on her throne, watching everything with calm authority. She was draped in deep crimson, her golden eyes reflecting the firelight. Beside her, General Kalroth stood, his arms crossed. Unlike Seraphis, his expression was hard, unreadable. Darien knew that even though he had won the arena battle, his real challenge was just beginning. A familiar voice cut through his thoughts. "I see you're still standing, human," said Korvek, stepping up beside him. He was dressed in ceremonial black and silver armor, his massive frame towering over Darien. Though he had lost their battle, there was no bitterness in his tone. Instead, his golden eyes held something unexpected: amusement. Darien smirked. Was that a compliment? Korvek chuckled. "A warrior who can defeat me deserves respect." He extended a large hand. Darien hesitated for a moment before gripping it. The Valkyrie warrior's grip was strong, but not crushing. It was a handshake between equals. Before Darien could respond, a sharp voice rang out. "Human." He turned to see Kalroth approaching. The general's face was unreadable, but there was no mistaking the weight behind his words. "You have won a fight," Kalroth said, "but one fight does not make you a warrior. Do you truly believe you deserve a place among us?" Darien held his gaze. He could feel the eyes of the other Valkyrie warriors watching, waiting. He could have given a careful answer, something respectful, something cautious, but that wasn't who he was. Instead, he smirked. "I don't just believe it." His voice was steady. "I proved it." A few warriors muttered in surprise. Some even chuckled. Korvek grinned. Kalroth's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Queen Seraphis finally spoke. "Enough, General. The human has already been tested." She turned her golden gaze to Darien. "But there is one final matter to discuss." She gestured toward the side of the hall, where a warrior approached, a female Valkyrie, tall and regal, with dark violet markings along her arms and sharp golden eyes. Her movements were smooth, precise, like a panther ready to strike. "This is Commander Lizara Velkera," Seraphis said. "My sister." Darien straightened. The Queen's sister. Lizara studied him, her expression unreadable. Then she spoke. "You fought well today," she said. "But the true test of a warrior is not in an arena. It is in battle." Darien frowned. "Battle." Seraphis leaned forward. "We are at war, human. And if you are to be one of us, you will fight beside us." A chill ran down Darien's spine, but he didn't hesitate. He met Lizara's gaze. "Then tell me where to go." Lizara smirked. "Good, because we leave at dawn." Darien stood at the edge of the grand Valkyrie warship, watching the planet's surface grow smaller beneath them. The city of Veltherim had been a place of fire and stone, a world that had tested him. But now he was leaving it behind. The battle ahead was all that mattered. He glanced around the massive warship's interior. The walls pulsed with veins of golden energy, powering the ship's advanced systems. The Valkyrie fleet moved in perfect formation, their sleek black ships cutting through space like blades. Lizara Velkera, the Queen's sister, stood at the command deck, her arms folded. She was tall, with deep violet markings on her arms and piercing golden eyes that rarely blinked. She was nothing like Seraphis, colder, sharper, more dangerous. Darian had met warriors before, but Lizara was different. There was no hesitation in her movements, no doubt in her gaze. She turned to him. "We arrive in 1 hour." Darian nodded. "And what exactly are we facing?" Lizara studied him, as if deciding how much to tell him. "A faction known as the Draxian Reavers. They are raiders, mercenaries with no honor. They attacked one of our outposts and took prisoners. We are going to get them back." Darian narrowed his eyes. "Prisoners." Lizara's expression darkened. "Valkyrie warriors. They will not break easily, but the Draxians are known for their cruelty. We must move fast." Darian clenched his fists. He knew what it was like to be trapped, powerless. He would not let it happen to anyone else. Korvek approached, his heavy boots echoing against the metal floor. "You look ready for war, human." Darian smirked. "War's not new to me." Korvek laughed. "Then fight well. The Draxians are not worthy opponents, but they are vicious. Do not hesitate." Lizara nodded. "Good advice. Hesitation will get you killed." Darian met her gaze. "I don't hesitate." Lizara studied him for a moment, then turned back toward the command deck. "We will see." 1 hour later, the warship emerged from hyperspace, and the battlefield came into view. The Draxian fleet was already waiting, a collection of jagged, ugly warships with red lights glowing from their cores. They looked more like floating beasts than ships, covered in spikes and plating stolen from different species. Darian felt the shift as the Valkyrie warship engaged its weapons. Shields activated, energy cannons locked on. Lizara's voice rang out. "Boarding teams, prepare for launch." Darian tightened the straps of his Valkyrie armor. It wasn't made for humans, but it fit well enough. The metal plating was dark silver, reinforced with energy shields. A pulse rifle rested in his hands, but his true weapon was the blade strapped to his side. Close combat. That was where he thrived. Korvek stood beside him, rolling his shoulders. "This will be fun." Darian smirked. "For us." The drop bay doors opened, revealing the enemy flagship ahead. The boarding pods launched like bullets, slamming into the Draxian ship's hull. The doors hissed open. Darian and the Valkyrie charged into the fight. The corridor was dark, narrow, filled with smoke and flashing red lights. Draxian warriors rushed forward, ugly, reptilian creatures with sharp armor and glowing red eyes. They hissed and roared, weapons raised. Darian didn't wait. He moved. His blade cut through the first enemy, tearing through its armor. He twisted, dodging a wild swing, then slammed his elbow into another warrior's face. It fell hard. Beside him, Korvek fought like a beast, his massive fists breaking through enemy defenses. Lizara was a shadow of death, her twin blades slicing through the Draxians with deadly precision. The enemy had numbers, the Valkyrie had skill. And Darian had something they didn't expect. He fought with a human's unpredictability. He ducked under a wild swing, grabbed an enemy's own weapon, and turned it against them. He moved fast, hitting hard, never staying in one place long enough to be a target. In minutes, the Draxians were falling back. Korvek grinned. "Not bad, human." Darian wiped blood from his blade. "We're not done yet." Lizara's voice came through the comm. "We've reached the prisoner hold. Move now." Darian didn't hesitate. The real fight was about to begin. The air inside the Draxian warship was thick with smoke and the scent of burning metal. The walls groaned under the weight of the battle outside. Explosions shook the corridors. But Darien and the Valkyrie warriors pushed forward. The prisoner hold was close. Darien sprinted ahead, his blade dripping with black Draxian blood. Korvek and Lazara flanked him, their weapons cutting through any enemy that dared to stand in their way. A group of heavily armored Draxians blocked the path, their red eyes glowing through their helmets. Lazara didn't slow. She moved like a shadow, twin blades flashing. One Draxian fell, then another. Korvek charged forward, his massive fists crushing an enemy's skull. Darien dodged a wild swing and drove his sword into the last Draxian's throat. The enemy collapsed. Lazara wiped blood from her blade. Move. They rushed forward, reaching the heavy steel doors of the prisoner hold. The control panel flickered beside it. Korvek cursed. Locked. Lazara turned to Darien. Can you break it? Darien studied the panel. The technology was unfamiliar, but he'd cracked enough systems before. He pulled a small energy tool from his belt, pressed it against the panel, and rewired the circuits. Seconds later, the door hissed open. Inside, a dozen Valkyrie warriors stood chained to the walls. Their armor was dented, their faces bruised, but their eyes still burned with defiance. One of them, tall, silver-haired, with a scar across his cheek, looked up. General Valor. Lazara stepped forward. We're here to bring you home. Valor's golden eyes narrowed. Took you long enough. Korvek grinned. You're welcome. Darien moved fast, slicing through the chains with his blade. The freed warriors grabbed weapons from fallen enemies, their battle instincts returning instantly. But then, an alarm blared. A deep guttural voice echoed through the ship's comm system. You dare defy the Draxian Reavers. You will all die here. Darien turned. A massive figure stepped through the door. The Draxian warlord. He was twice the size of any warrior Darien had faced, covered in dark crimson armor lined with jagged spikes. His eyes burned like dying stars, and his heavy axe pulsed with dark energy. Lazara's grip tightened on her weapons. We end this now. The warlord charged. Darien dodged at the last second as the axe slammed into the ground, cracking the metal floor. Sparks flew, and the entire room shook from the force. Valor and the freed Valkyrie attacked, but the warlord was a monster. He knocked Korvek aside with a single backhand. A warrior tried to stab him. He caught the blade with his bare hand and crushed it. Darien's heart pounded. This wasn't just another enemy. This was a force of destruction. But he wasn't backing down. The warlord turned his glowing red eyes on Darien. You are the human. The legend. Darien smirked. And you're just another obstacle. The warlord roared and swung his axe. Darien dodged again, but barely. The blade sliced through the air where he had just been, leaving a crackling energy trail. Lazara struck next, her blades flashing toward the warlord's throat. The warlord caught both of them in his massive hand. With a snarl, he threw her across the room. She hit the wall hard, groaning as she struggled to get up. Darien felt the fire in his chest ignite. He ran straight at the warlord. The axe came down, but this time, Darien didn't dodge. He slid under the attack, the energy just barely missing his head. Then, with lightning-fast reflexes, he lunged up, slamming his blade into the warlord's exposed side. The warlord howled in rage. But Darien wasn't done. He grabbed a plasma grenade from his belt, activated it, and jammed it into the warlord's armor. He leaped back, just as the explosion ripped through the warlord's chest. The massive figure staggered. His axe dropped to the ground. He let out a final, shuddering breath, and collapsed. Silence filled the room. Lazara pushed herself up, breathing hard. Not bad. Human. Korvek groaned, sitting up. I think I broke something. Valor smirked. We need to leave. Now. Darien wiped sweat from his forehead. The battle wasn't over yet. Because outside, the Draxian fleet was waiting. and the real war was about to begin. The warship trembled beneath their feet as the alarms blared across the corridors. Outside, the Draxian fleet gathered like a storm, their warships casting dark shadows against the burning sky. Darien gripped his sword, his body still buzzing from the battle with the warlord. One victory down, but the war wasn't over. Vaylor, the newly freed general, turned toward Lizara. "Our fleet is standing by, but we can't fight our way out alone. We need to take control of this ship's main cannon." Lizara nodded, her golden eyes sharp. "Then we take the bridge." Korvek cracked his knuckles. "My kind of plan." Darien exhaled, steadying himself. This was it. If they failed, they would all die here. They moved quickly, cutting through the corridors toward the command center. The Draxians knew they were coming. The halls were lined with enemy soldiers, their plasma rifles glowing in the dim light. Vaylor led the charge. He moved like a war god, his blade carving through the enemy ranks. Lizara fought beside him, a blur of speed and precision. She twisted, dodged, and struck like lightning, her twin blades slicing through the Draxian's thick armor. Korvek laughed as he grabbed a soldier by the throat and slammed him into a wall. Darien moved through the chaos, dodging plasma fire and striking with deadly accuracy. He had fought in 100 battles, but none had ever felt as important as this one. Finally, they reached the massive doors of the command bridge. Lizara pressed against the control panel, her fingers flying across the alien interface. "I can get us in. Just hold them off a little longer." Darien turned. More Draxian soldiers stormed the corridor. They were running out of time. Darien's breath came fast. His muscles burned, but he refused to back down. He met the enemy head-on, his blade flashing like silvered fire. Korvek roared, smashing through their ranks. Vaylor fought beside him, his golden eyes glowing with battle fury. Lizara cursed. Almost there. Just a few more seconds. A plasma bolt whizzed past Darien's face, singing his cheek. He ignored the pain and kept moving. Then, the doors hissed open. "Go!" Lizara shouted. They'd rushed inside. The bridge was massive, its walls lined with glowing control panels. The Draxian captain stood at the center, a towering figure with cold, reptilian eyes. "You're too late," the captain snarled. "The fleet is already preparing to fire." Darien didn't hesitate. He launched himself at the captain, sword raised. The fight was brutal. The captain was fast, faster than Darien expected. But Darien was faster. With one final strike, he drove his blade into the captain's chest. The Draxian let out a strangled gasp before collapsing to the ground. Lizara didn't waste time. She ran to the control panel. "I'm taking control of the ship's main cannon." She hacked into the system, her hands moving swiftly. The fleet outside loomed closer. Korvek grabbed the comms. "Valkyrie fleet, prepare for impact." Lizara activated the cannon. Outside, the massive energy weapon charge. A deep hum filled the ship as power surged through its core. Then, a beam of blinding blue light tore through space. The Draxian flagship, the heart of their invasion fleet, was caught in the blast. For a moment, it held together. Then, in a fiery explosion, it shattered into 1,000 burning pieces. The rest of the Draxian fleet hesitated. Their leader was dead. Their flagship was gone. And then, they ran. One by one, the enemy ships turned and jumped into hyperspace, disappearing into the void. A stunned silence filled the bridge. Then, cheers erupted. Korvek threw his fists in the air. Vaylor let out a deep, victorious laugh. Lizara turned to Darien, a rare smile on her face. "We did it." Darien let out a breath. He had come to this world as an outsider, a mystery. But now he was something more. He was the legend, and the universe would never forget his name.